Welcome to the Flower Essence Podcast, and join us on an exploration of the healing wisdom of flowers.
With combined decades of experience in the study and practice of flower essence therapy, I, Kathleen Aspenns, and co-host Rochana Felde guide you to reconnect to nature with these potent vibrational remedies. Welcome back to the podcast. It is a real treat today. We have a good friend, Sarah Holmes, with us today to share with you on the podcast. She's been in private practice as a clinical herbalist since 1998, and she offers consultations in person and by phone. As a clinical herbalist, she works with individuals to support them in regaining and maintaining their health through herbs, diet, and flower essences. She addresses the physical, emotional, and spiritual from an energetic perspective and believes strongly in the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. She is trained in both Native American and Western herbalism, and with Karen Sanders, created and founded the Blue Otter School of Herbal Medicine, beginning in 2003. In addition to the programs at Blue Otter, she travels and teaches at other schools and conferences. You may have heard her as a co-host of the Herbal Highway on KPFA Public Radio. That program has been going since 1998 and is an incredible asset to the herbal community. You can also find that as a podcast. So welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with the both of you.
Welcome, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so we have a little bit of a conversation going ahead of time, and a real interest is to hear how you see that interconnection between herbs and flower essences. And I'd love to hear how you work with those on that continuum in the world of healing.
Mm-hmm. It's endlessly interesting to me, really, that topic. And so there's a place where, well, it's not just one place. I think there's a lot of places where essences and herbs come together and they're part of the same medicine. You know, first of all, they're all from plants. So there's that piece where we're finding that connection of them all being together, and they all carry vibration. So there's this level of dosing that alters the vibration. So for instance, if I'm formulating, I'm putting in plants where I want their physical action and where I want their more energetic action. And so that depends on how much I'm putting in as a ratio between all of those. And so the essences are the least dense, if you will, vibration. And so I will oftentimes within a formula, I'll have plants that are working on a physical level. There's more of them physically in the formula. And then I might have 1 to 4 drops of a given essence also in that same bottle. And I use the tinctures in that way too. I might put 1 or 2 drops of a given plant tincture also in a formula to bring it to not the physical level, but the spirit level of that plant, the vibrational level of that plant. And so then there's this interesting place of I use flower essences and drop doses of tinctures in a similar way within a formula or by themselves. And within those two, there's some differences as well.
So some of our listeners may not know that herbal tinctures can be used in this way, this vibrational way that's similar to how we use flower essences. And it's called spirit, like a spirit dose is what some people call it. And I find that's really interesting. How would you compare the difference between, say, a spirit dose of an herb and its correlating flower essence?
Mm-hmm. That's a piece that's really interesting, and I feel like the plants are still teaching me about that. And I do want to say the plants that I have in there are larger doses, still also, of course, have vibration and still have their personality and energy as well. It just often manifests a little differently, I think, is what happens. So what's really fascinating to me is this crossover place between drop doses of tinctures and flower essences. And of course, this can vary from plant to plant because we have what are called our low dose plants, where a single drop is actually a physical dose, plants that are very toxic. So there are exceptions, as there is with everything in life. But I've had not only in my practice, but in my teaching over the years, because I've had hours and hours of plant meditations that I've held and conducted in classrooms. And we'll do those plant meditations with a single drop of a tincture or a single drop of a flower essence. And some people can respond differently to the plant. Some people find the vibration of a flower essence to be more easily accessible. And some people find a drop dose of a tincture more easily accessible. So it's kind of an interesting place. And some people find both of them very accessible. So and I think there's a lot of factors there. And I don't think there's any like, oh, this person is more or less evolved. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's really about we're each beings of energy too. And so what resonates within each of us is going to vary a little bit. That's, to me, part of the beauty of all these different modalities of healing is that there's something that's going to resonate for everybody. And for some people, many modalities resonate for them, and others, they're just like trying to find their one place. And so I think some of it also is a matter of familiarity. So it's like what my energy feels like and what I'm used to in the energy fields around me is going to influence what I notice or what I can feel coming in from, say, a flower essence or a drop dose of a tincture. So there's that place. So, but within a formula, say for a client, it just depends on the medicine I want for that particular person. And do I think they're going to resonate more? Um, I'm trying to think. It's mostly, I have this whole range of essences I'm using, whether they're flowers or gems or environmental essences or drop doses of tinctures. So all of that's in my apothecary, and all of that's what I'm drawing from. And then the particulars, sometimes I do feel like, oh, I really want a flower essence for this person. Or sometimes I really want a drop dose of a tincture for this person. And that's that real individual place of what I'm feeling is going to resonate most for that person.
And it's something that's probably changing over time as well, because you would be working with somebody over a period of time to help align their health, and maybe at one season or a different season they might have a different response. Does that sound right?
It does. It does. I think it really can change for people over time. And yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's this part of my brain that really wants to draw these sweeping conclusions about, okay, these are the people that essences are going to work profoundly for, and these are the people that drop doses of tinctures are going to work profoundly for. And it really isn't that simple. I have to say, I can speak to my personal experience of years ago, it was harder for me to feel a flower essence if I took, say, just a drop of a flower essence. But at that time, what I noticed was I would feel it over time. I would feel it cumulatively, where more often I would feel the drop dose of a tincture more immediately. And that's changed for me over time I think as they've become more familiar, and also as I've become more familiar to myself, as we all hopefully do as each year goes by. So there's this place of everyone's experience is really different.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool how that premise of it working over time, having been, at least in the the founding principles of flower essence therapy based on Dr. Bach's work, it was all about taking something over a period of time. And, I loved his phrase of that they work like snow melting in the sunshine, where, you don't really see it happening, but it's happening when you look back over time. So sometimes we look for a kind of we tend to, as for sort of Western-minded people, love to look for that magical, like, boom, over the head and a change. And in fact, healing is much more organic than that, I think. Yeah.
I do too. And absolutely, most people, and myself included, if I'm going to be honest, we want that big experience, right? We really do. And I've seen essences give that to people in a single dose. And most of the time, that's not what I see. And I think that's one of those gifts of the essences, is that gift of patience and that gift of belief. Because if you didn't believe it at all, you wouldn't even bother to take it, right? So even people that are more skeptical about this vibrational level of the healing, if they're taking it, then there's at least a kernel of belief there, or they wouldn't even bother. And that's what I like to nourish and nurture, is that kernel. And for some people, they've got the whole cob coming in, right? They're there with it. But we just want that at least to nourish and nurture that kernel of belief.
I like what you were saying about the herbs, when, using herbs medicinally, as you would as an herbalist, how it also has a spirit effect as part of it. It's all part of the plant. A lot of times we try to define these differences between flower essences and herbs and essential oils and all of the things that can be made out of the plant. And and I'll hear myself explaining a lot when I have to do these nutshell explanations that, the herb is affecting your biophysical, chemistry, and the flower essence is typically more on that emotional, spiritual spectrum. Except that's just such a black and white answer that doesn't really speak to what plant allies are really all about when it comes to that. Do you want to talk a little more about that?
I would love to. It's a good point, and it brings me back to that original part that Kathleen pulled out of my bio about mind, body, and spirit. And I think that phrase has gotten so common in the last few years that people don't even really hear it or don't even really think about it. And I think the spirit piece gets dropped out a lot. So to my way of viewing the world is that we're spiritual beings. And right now we've got this physical body also. But our physical body is energy. Like everything that's material has energy, is vibrating, is electrons and everything else that's vibrating and moving. And there's a energy field around every being, every living being as well. So our physical bodies are energy too. They have an energetic to them also that goes way beyond hot or cold, or those really kind of rudimentary constitutional definitions of energy. So there's this place of, even when I was teaching physiology to my students at herb school, I was still always trying to bring it back to the magic and the energy of our physical bodies also. And this is just the densest form of our being at this time. And so that physical energy and what's happening within the body is just as important and just as much about the energetics as what's going on in our hearts and what's going on in our energy body as well. So I'm not sure if I connected all that quite yet, because there's a lot there. There's a lot within that. So one example would be to talk about, say somebody has lung issues. So I'll talk about that because, a lot of people are concerned about their lungs right now with what's going on with the virus. So, our lungs, obviously it's a physical organ. we know they're there. We could be cut open and see them, right? It's something tangible. But there's an energy and a vibration to what our lungs do in their important job of keeping us alive. And so we know from traditional Chinese medicine that their definition of what the emotion correspondence to the lungs is grief. So what I see and what I was also taught in my training is that one can impact the other. So if there's a physical imbalance in the lung, that can bring up grief for people. Likewise, if someone is going through grief, it can lead to, over time, a physical imbalance in the lungs. And I really, I've been trained to believe, and I've seen it, and I really wholeheartedly believe that most of our physical imbalances, most of our physical diseases has a root in the emotional and spirit bodies of us. And some of the things that I really wouldn't even begin to put on a personal level, like COVID-19, anyone who gets that, to me, that's our, those things, and cancer, those are our collective manifestations of imbalance, right? That us as a whole, globally, collectively, create imbalances that cause physical imbalances in others. This, I should be more clear. Our collective spiritual imbalance can cause a physical imbalance in some people, or right now in a lot of people. So that's part of that perspective. So to me, I'm always looking at, I want to support the physical to support the emotional and the energy body, the spirit body, and vice versa. If someone's grieving, I physically protect their lungs. If they have a physical imbalance in their lungs, I'm going to be paying particular attention to the grief in their life, because the one is going to impact the other.
Yeah, the listeners won't see, but Kathleen and I have been nodding our head for like the last 5 minutes. Very much in alignment with what you're saying there.
And I've been talking with my hands. They're not getting that either.
And I love this aspect. To me, it's an ecological aspect, right? We are our own ecologies in and of our own bodies, but we're also expressions of the greater whole of the planet. And these imbalances, they'll reflect in us. And one of the things I love hearing, and you haven't said this specifically, but there's so much judgment around a lot of diseases. And I really love this expansiveness that you're bringing to this conversation of that there's space in it for the sorrow and the grief for what's going on in the world. And also we're supporting the health of the individual, mind, body, spirit, the whole thing. But it's not about you did this wrong and therefore you got this disease.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. And it's a fine line. It's real easy to, if you have a disease, it's real easy to hear the judgment in that. So I appreciate you bringing that out, Kathleen, because there's this place where it's not about blame, because there are plenty of amazing, self-actualized, spiritual beings of people who get sick and die. And there are plenty of people who most would describe as being very emotionally, spiritually out of balance, who live very long, healthy lives. It's nothing is that cut and dried. And I think that's important. Where I like to bring that out, what's important about that to me is it's something that we as individuals can do and participate. It's a way we can participate in our health, right? By how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling, not to take it as a blame, but take it as a empowerment. Like, this is something else I could be doing, right? Like, I might not be able to walk across the room. I might not be able to, do X, Y, or Z, but I can lay here quietly and visualize health in my body. And that's actually going to help physical body to heal. right? So absolutely, there are the environmental impacts that are, to me, that reflection of our collective spiritual imbalance have huge impacts on individuals. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's no blame, and even if it was something like that, maybe I had some habits that contributed to an illness I got. Where do those habits come from? Those habits probably came from an earlier trauma or an earlier learning, right? So it still has its root in my emotional spiritual experience.
So agree. I love that perspective, and also, in addition, I like to reflect to people who are immersed in the process of helping themselves heal, that the healing work they do inside also has an effect on the world. Not only is that the thing you can do, but you're also positively impacting the world by working on your own healing. At least that's my belief. I don't know if that's something you're in alignment with as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the most radical political things we can do is to heal ourselves. The dominant paradigm is not supportive of personal healing, and because we're in our power, and we're in our hearts, and we're in our power in a good way, in that balanced way, not in that power over or power under, but in that way of like being all of who we are, because nobody else can be you. Each of us is the only one that can do us well. And hopefully we're doing us well, because no one else is going to do it. And so absolutely that healing is so important. And it's all important. To me, it's just as important as demonstrating out on the street as it is volunteering in a nursing home, or all this big long list of things that we can't do right now. But there's this place where we can do this. We can work on this internal revolution, if you will, while we're staying at home and staying in place and sheltering in place.
Yeah, herbalism, it's always been medicine for the people, has been sort of its tagline. I don't know how that originated, and maybe you have an idea about that, but I've heard it so many times, and it just originated from folk traditions around the world. And so it's always been about having that empowerment. And what I think is neat too is flower essences sort of evolved. Dr. Bach was a homeopath and a doctor, and left that in order to create medicines that were more accessible to people as well.
Absolutely. There's a place also, one of the many reasons I love essences is because they're such a gentle footprint on our environment. It takes so little plant to make an essence that so many of our plants are also getting loved to death, right? They're getting over harvested, they're getting overused. And so there's this place where that vibration is sometimes all we need. And that's really beautiful. It's kind of like I give this example sometimes of going back to my thesis of the emotional spiritual root of most things. So I used to get migraines when I was in my early adulthood, and I also was really codependent at that time. So I wasn't good with my boundaries. And so what would happen was it took me getting a migraine to realize, oh, I was upset because I was not connected. I wasn't tuned in. And then I got to where I noticed, oh, my neck's tightening up a little bit. What just happened? Right. And then I got to where my neck wouldn't have to tighten up. I could register it in my heart or in my emotional body or in my logical mind. Oh, okay, that didn't work for me. That didn't sit right for me. I need to say something or do something. So sometimes it's like, how hard do I have to get hit over the head? And in my case, it was literally, I had to get a headache to notice something. And so that continuum of the plant energy is similar too. It's like, oh, could I just take an essence? Can I just take this vibration into my body and relax enough and let it in enough to allow it to support me to be in greater balance, right? Or maybe I need to take 5 drops of a tincture to notice it, to bring that in, to let it shift my body. Because to me, the plants in all their forms are about reminding us what we already know. They remind our bodies how to be in balance. They remind our hearts how to be in balance. They remind our minds how to be in balance, right? So to me, it's like, all right, what do I need? And hopefully I don't need to get hit over the head. But so, sometimes I do. So we're all human, right? So that's part of our experience as well, too.
How did you get started with flower essences? Were they part of what you did when you I think you've been an herbalist since the late 90s. Were they something that you worked with since the beginning, or did they come later?
I worked with them pretty much from the beginning because my training in energetics as an approach to how I was working as a clinical herbalist just opened that up as a natural part of my practice as well. So I started incorporating essences in from the very beginning. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the differences or similarities between those aspects of Western herbalism and a native approach to herbalism, which I know is also part of your practice? Can you tell us a little bit more about that and maybe how it intersects with essences, if it does?
Sure, I can try to. So my that aspect of my training comes from Karen Sanders, and so her lineage is Choctaw, which is a Southeast nation. Um, so I want to acknowledge that lineage. So from that perspective, that particular indigenous perspective, but many indigenous traditions share this perspective, is that there's energy and vibration in everything.
I'm just really curious because I think maybe a lot of listeners are familiar with more Western forms of herbalism, but every time I hear you talking about, deer medicine, or I'm just like, what is that? Tell me more about that. I'd like to know more about that native philosophy or approach to herbalism and how maybe there may be some intersections with the vibrational.
Yeah, what I found with my Western herbalism training was it was much more focused on physiology and plant constituents. So much more focused the chemistry and the denser realms of our experience, and a lot less focus on the more subtler forms of our experience, both the emotional and the spiritual, energetic aspects. And so, what my understanding from what Indigenous perspectives on healing I've been exposed to is it's connected to nature. This is about being connected to nature. And so that's where many worldviews come together with those, what I consider universal truths, or what I've found to be universal truths in my limited experience in this world. So every living being has energy and vibration and is a part of nature, including us human beings in our fumbling way. We are also a part of nature and not separate from. And and so we're all, it's the microcosm and the macrocosm that we were touching on earlier of within myself there's everything, and the whole universe is within each of us. And so, how could we even begin to think that we're separate from the universe and from nature and from everything? And so, we have these amazing gifts that these plants give us. And here we are in this place of, um, I know a lot of thinking, caring people feel really bad about themselves for being human beings. And this is where it's really important to remember, as part of our healing and our collective healing, is to embrace that we are nature and we're a part of nature, and that let's focus on getting each of our individual energy and vibration in alignment with nature. That's part of that collective healing. And so it's, and instead of thinking of ourselves as this aberration of nature, absolutely, we've caused a lot of problems, but that doesn't mean that we're not still children of this earth and a part of nature. And so there's a way to bring ourselves back into harmony with that. And I think the essences can really help us with that. All the plant medicines can really help us with that, because they remind us of this. They remind us of our place in that world. And so there's a lot of really kind of big philosophical aspects of this that my little brain is going. So I'm not sure if I'm quite answering again all of what you're trying to get to here.
I'm just in love with what you've been saying, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Ro, right?
Yeah.
It's so inspiring, and that's something I feel so strongly, is just that connection to Earth, that we belong here.
Mm-hmm.
And you go out and you spend time with a plant, you spend time in nature, and you remember who you are, that you do belong here. All of the imprints of guilt and shame and not enoughness, those are not ideas that we get from nature at all. And there's no better medicine than plant medicine, and certainly the flower essences for helping us to remember who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talk a lot on this podcast about getting out into nature and connecting with plants in whatever way people can. If it's not in person, even by looking at pictures, just to really start to develop that relationship. And, I firmly believe that the plants are the teachers. So, the flower essences are sort of these little messages in the container from the plant, but you can get it right from the plant if you work with it.
Absolutely. And I have the gift of, I live in the country, so I have space around me, so I can go outside whenever I want. And I was really reflecting about that before we started our conversation today, because we're all hopefully staying home to protect each other. And in cities and places where there's much denser populations, I understand that getting out into the natural world is not as possible, or even impossible, for some people right now. But part of what you can do is, any plant you have in your home, whether it's your Boston fern or your philodendron, you can sit and connect with that plant. Or you can go into the spice rack in your kitchen and take a little bit of time in your hand and smell it, and let your hand warm it up, so you can take in that aroma, or just sit with it and feel it, or do a steam with it. But it's that simple. Everyone has plants in their home. At the very least, you've got a handful of spices in your kitchen. So, and a lot of the food we eat are plants, hopefully. I know probably not as much right now, because we can't get to the grocery stores so much, but, so you have what you need in your home. It can be that simple. So I really encourage, and if you do have some essences in your house, or you do have some tinctures in your house, you can practice just sitting with them. You can just quiet yourself as much as you're able to right now. I know that's challenging, but relatively speaking, quiet yourself, take one drop, and just let yourself feel. And without a big expectation of like, oh, I'm going to have this peak experience right now in this moment. You might, but you might not, and that's okay too. But just that quieting. I know I've had this experience many, many times over the years with students early on in the program, and we do a plant meditation, and a handful of people would be like, oh, that was really calming. And then the next plant the next day, oh, that was really calming. The next plant the next, oh, that was really calming. And I'm like, all right, maybe, are you seeing a pattern here? Maybe it's just a matter of, do you ever stop and just sit and let yourself be quiet? Right. And maybe that's what's calming you right now. Could have been the plant too, but the plants probably have something even more to let you know. But just that gift that they give us of like, all right, I'm going to sit down and pay attention to you for a minute. And that's how we build relationship. That's how we build relationship with people. We spend time with them. So that's also how we can build relationship with plants, who are also our ancestors of, okay, I'm going to give you some time and attention right now. And this is how we build that relationship. And that's how we build this capacity within ourselves to feel the plants on a conscious level. Because on an unconscious level, our body, our energy field, they're relating to the plant and doing stuff. And whether or not our mind is in on it may or may not be happening. And sometimes it's better if the mind's left out of it for a little while, because it's real easy to then go to that overly analytical place of, oh, what does that mean? What does that mean about me? Uh-oh, what does that mean about the plant? Oh, maybe. So it can be to trust that process and just go, okay, our hearts have a tremendous amount of intelligence and our bodies have a tremendous amount of intelligence. And to just like let it be and keep our mind out of the equation for a little while sometimes can open up the space.
I like that because sometimes what I'll do when I've attuned with a plant or something, my first thought is that little mind going, "What did you get? What did you get?"
That's right, exactly.
And it's like, hang on a minute, is that really the right attitude to have?
Right.
Oh my goodness. And how are you meeting this moment? How are you working with your clients and in your world with the people that you know and love and work with this time? It's really unprecedented in our lifetimes anyways. And how are you finding to offer counsel or advice or guidance, or where are you starting with people on this for some wisdom?
Well, that's a big order. So it may or may not be wise what follows. But what I'm doing, I think it's really, really important for all of us, because I'm witnessing this in myself and in others, is much less capacity to do multiple things. There's so much of our energy is, even when I'm not feeling particularly scared in a moment, my heart feels calm, my mind feels calm, but my body's not. See, this is that place. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and the analogy was, because most of us that live in California, at least, we've had this experience of forest fires in these last few years. And so when they've been close, we know what that is. So, we've had fire seasons where I live now for years now. And what I notice is, even when I know a fire is really far away, I'm not in any immediate danger, but there's a little bit of the smell of smoke in the air, my body is frightened, because our bodies have intelligence too. And my body is going, I smell smoke. That means danger. We need to do something. Right. And I, I really feel like that's happening with our bodies right now with this virus. It's like, okay, even if I'm not particularly worried about myself, I know this danger is present, and this danger is present for all of us. And so it's really important that we calm our bodies and we calm our hearts and we calm our minds. But calming our bodies is also a part of calming energy field, because our bodies are energy too. So there's that place. So I think that's that first thing where it's really about fundamentals right now, and having a lot of patience and compassion for ourselves and for each other. And a lot of that is getting present in our bodies again, because when we're scared, most of us, or a lot of us, check out, right? It's like, all right, not safe. I can't physically leave, so you emotionally, mentally leave, right? So, and sometimes that's what you need to do. You have to take a break, right? And sometimes what can work more deeply to calm is, instead of checking out, to check in, right? To go in more deeply, to connect with self more deeply, to connect with, keep our hearts connected and open, to keep our energy field connected and open with good boundaries. And that's the other piece I'm really talking about with people, because our immune system's our physical boundary system. And so that's what we're trying to support right now. But because the physical and the energetic are inextricably connected, we can't separate those. We need to be working on our energy boundaries as well, and our emotional boundaries as well. So to me, these aren't walls, they're filters. We want to let in what we choose to let in, but we want to keep out that which is harmful to us. So in order to support our physical immunity, I do think it's important that we make sure that we have our protective energy fields around us and our boundaries around us. And if nothing else, it helps keep other people's emotions off of us, which can make it harder for us to stay in balance with our own emotions. And in this time when we need to physically be apart from people, to me, that means we have to that much more spend time connecting our hearts to each other when we don't have that physical shorthand of a hug or even being in the same room with each other. It's that much more important that we put energy into our hearts, and we put energy into those heart connections, as well as put that energy into those spiritual connections. And I know for people that are part of spiritual and religious communities and not being able to be in each other's presence right now, it's that much more important that we reach out with our spirits to each other, that we reach out with our spirits to nature, that we reach out our spirits to the spirit world, or whatever form of being that you do or don't connect with, bigger than yourself, that we need to feed and nourish that, because there's a contraction that naturally comes with fear, and energetically and also physically, for the sake of our poor bodies right now. We need to be in a place of softness and expansion and connection with good, clear boundaries to stay healthy.
I resonate so much with what you're saying, and I think that you're just dead on with that, and that premise of staying connected at the heart level without having that physical connection. I think that's it's on everybody's mind, even though I've never heard it said in that way, and it's really resonating for me, the way that you've stated that, because it's exactly what we're needing more than anything right now, and being in your presence, albeit digitally, I feel that, and this has been so rich and beautiful to share this time with you, and thank you for sharing this with the audience of the podcast. So thanks very, very much. Can you tell our listeners more about how to find you and reach you and reach out to you?
Sure. And I just want to say too, I mean, thank you both so much. It's really been a pleasure to be able to sit here and talk with you today, and we nurture these connections, and this is part of our work, and that's one of the gifts of this work also, which I'm probably get some head nods from both of you on this, is that to do my work, I have to get myself in that balanced place for that time that I'm working with somebody. And so that's a gift, because I have like a built-in excuse to make sure I'm doing that work. So I love that. That's one of the gifts of the immense privilege I have in doing this work. So practical things. My website is blueotterschool.com. It's blue like the color, otter like the animal, school.com. I always teach in person, with the exception of the radio show. I always teach in person because it's about the energy and the vibration. So I'm really trying to figure out I might be able to do that differently in the coming months. But classes are there, and I do consultations, and a lot of that I already do on the phone. So that form of doing that piece of my work is I'm already really comfortable with the phone. I don't do this video thing, so I have to say I'm not as comfortable with that. But who knows? As I've been joking with Karen, the pandemic's bringing us the rest of the way into the 21st century of technology. So here we are. I am on Instagram at Blue Otter School, and I'm on the Herbal Highway, which you can catch at kpfa.org, the Herbal Highway.
Thank you. We'll be sure to put all of those links also in the show notes. So for anyone listening, we do extensive show notes and transcript of the whole podcast. So everything in there is going to be written down. We've had a number of people express to us how much they appreciate that if they are hearing impaired or if they have challenges with listening to a podcast, they can enjoy the podcast in another format. So we like to make sure that it's accessible for multiple formats for people. But
That's
yeah,
great.
We'll be sure to put your contact information in there so that people can know where to find you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been delightful. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so good to finally meet you.
So thanks so much for being with us today, and we hope to have you again in the future. It's been really great, and there's so much more that we could share. And I just really want to encourage all of the listeners to think about with whom they can share this podcast, because I'm sure you have somebody in your life, in your heart, who would love to hear these messages and would love to learn more about the plants and about vibrational medicine through the flowers. And so please feel free to share. We'd love for you to share. We'd love to connect with you on Facebook and Instagram. We love to hear from you. So look forward to seeing you next time. Well, hearing you next time, joining us next time on the podcast. And thanks so much. Bye now.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Flower Essence Podcast with Rochana Felde and Kathleen Aspenns, and we appreciate your interest in connecting with nature on a deeper level. You can find us online at thefloweressencepodcast.com or join us on Facebook and continue the discussion.
This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. We are not physicians and do not diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions. Please consult with your own physician or healthcare practitioner regarding the suggestions and recommendations made by the hosts and guests of the Flower Essence Podcast.